This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all. The most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO, Taishu, Shadanalai, Sekan. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, and this is Jay Winter Nightwolf Live on YouTube. My executive producers here with us tonight, not the one sitting beside me. I don't know her, but Leslie Fry. Les, how are you?
Halito, Chimichukma. I'm
Good.
doing well.
So would you do us the honor of a land acknowledgement, please?
Of course. So let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of the lands that we reside on, and especially their ancestors, descendants, and all indigenous people who live now and have ever lived on this land that we call Turtle Island and beyond. But more than acknowledgement, let's honor and support our existing indigenous communities by helping them continue their land-based practices, traditions, and way of life, by dispelling false narratives about their history and people while promoting their authentic truths, helping them heal from past wrongs and offenses, and assisting them in protecting and restoring back to health the land, nature, and the water, which brings life.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
You know, you just mentioned in your land acknowledgement the true values of Native customs and healings. And tonight's show is centered around Native medicines before the white man came and how our medicines kept so many people alive throughout the centuries. I have two very, very special guests with me tonight. One, she's sitting right beside me. She's like my little sister for years. Her name is Dr. Allison Parker. Dr. Parker and I have been friends for over 30 years. And she's basically been my health guru. Several times I had cancer, and she was the one that stepped in with her native healing practices and medicines. So let me first introduce you to her, Dr. Allison Parker.
Before we do that, before we do our introductions, remember we do have our human interest story. So we do have something to talk about before we start. So let's go ahead and get into that, and then we'll make our formal introductions and have our guests come in.
Okay, good.
All right.
welcome back. Where's Linda?
She's here. We want to talk. We want to talk a little bit about the powwow before we bring Linda in.
Okay.
But that's the advertisement that you just saw was for the powwow at Manatawny Creek. That's going to be happening on May 6th and 7th in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And we wanted to really talk a little bit about powwows. If it's your first powwow attendant, we encourage you to come and visit that powwow this Thursday on Reflections of Turtle Island, which is on Facebook. They will be doing a whole show on powwow etiquette, what you need to know before you go. And we just want to talk a little bit about powwows briefly. But Elder, I'm going to kind of lead this up to you about powwows, what they mean, the significance of them. And then I'm going to bring Linda in so that she can add to the conversation, and then we can talk about healing.
Powwows were started because so many people, Native people, knew each other from everywhere. And this was actually a gathering to see your old friends over the years. Powwows have always been designated as places to meet, places to greet, places just to catch up with each other. And as bad as I want to go, excuse me, to this powwow, I won't be able to go because this Wednesday coming, I'm having heart surgery. So I'm going to ask you, Lester, when you go to the powwow, would you ask the people to pray for me? And
Yes, I will.
And very serious surgery. And I don't want to, just harp on that for the next 5 minutes. No. So I'm asking all of the viewers and people that know me to please send your prayers up to the Great Spirit and protect me while I'm under that procedure and under that knife. Thank you.
You're welcome. So just to let you know, once again, going to a powwow is mostly a gathering where you can come there and you can learn about Native culture while you're there, dance in a circle. But there is some etiquette to powwows. And if you want to learn what that etiquette is, even if you're not able to join us in Pottstown on May 6th and 7th, please join us on Facebook at Reflections of Turtle Island, or you can go to the powwow on Manatawny Creek. Join that channel, and on Thursday at 7 o'clock, we will be going over powwow etiquette, the history of powwow, and the importance of it to our Native people. With that, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and have you introduce Linda, and then we can start our conversation.
Okay. My first guest up in the upper right-hand corner with all that beautiful hair hanging out is my good friend and sister, Linda, Dr. Linda Thompson. Linda, how are you tonight?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I am a person who's been practicing holistic health all of her life. I'm a licensed nutritionist. I have a PhD in nutrition, and I'm also a Reiki master. And recently Spirit has moved me. I retired last July, and looking for, okay, what's next? What's my next calling? And I've always had an affinity for healing, but now I have been moved to be full on in terms of having a healing practice. So that's where I am right now, moving into a space of doing, facilitating healing, because I don't do any healing. I just facilitate the process, and it's up to the individual as to whether they are open and willing and ready to accept healing energy.
Well, I will tell everybody this. My sister Linda is a great Reiki master. She came over I think it was about a week and a half ago, and I told her about what I was getting ready to have done. And oh my God, I have never felt like that in my life. 5 minutes into her Reiki on me, she sent me somewhere else, and I still don't know where it was I went, but I was not present there, and I felt so much better after she finished and took her hands off of me and prayed with me. And I just love you, Linda.
I love you too, sweetie.
Okay.
Can we
Now,
turn Allison that gives us a little bit about background about what she does as well?
Hello, I'm Dr. Allison Parker. I initially started out as a chiropractor in Washington, D.C. I became a chiropractor after training for the Olympics and injured my neck, which kept me out of my final round to go to the Olympics. And I fell in love with chiropractic because it not only healed me, but I was able to heal a lot of people. In my journey as a chiropractor, I realized the disparities in medicine with indigenous people in DC. Melanated people were not getting the care that they needed, and they were coming to me desperately. So I started studying natural medicine and using herbs and other things to help people achieve optimum health as much as possible. I ventured out to my own people. My mother is Black Creek from Muskogee, Oklahoma. My father is part Cherokee
and Comanche.
and Comanche from North Carolina. And, going back to the res and to places where Native people, my heart began to ache for them because of all of the disparities that I saw. So I started dedicating my life to that area, and I still do.
May I interject something? When you were a little girl growing up,
Mm-hmm.
you went to Oklahoma quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and you learned from your grandmother,
My great-grandmother.
her great-grandmother, who actually kept a lot of people alive when Indian Health Service would not avail themselves to people. And her Comanche side, her dad, I knew him personally. Allison is actually the fourth or fifth generational great-granddaughter of Quanah Parker, the last Comanche war chief. And she's made some great strides in learning. She's always wanting to learn more. She was also Dick Gregory's doctor. And I can name them on and on and on.
Oh, yeah, they come through.
Yeah, people that she has actually had her healing hands on. So she brought me out of cancer 4 times, right?
You heal, like Dr. Linda said, on your own after I suggested things for you to take. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, if you're sick and you need good healers, there's 2 right here. And they practice Native American healing practices. Dr. Linda Spencer and Dr. Allison Parker.
Linda Thompson.
Thompson, I'm sorry.
I know. It's okay.
So we do have a question. We want to know, what exactly is Reiki?
Well, Reiki originated in Japan, and it is a form of channeling healing energy through the Reiki practitioner to an individual. You don't necessarily have to touch that person. You are just a channel to allow the energy to come through you to the person. And again, depending upon how open that person is to receiving the energy will determine if they're in pain, to what extent it goes away, or whatever the issue may be with that person. Now, the way I move through Reiki is I run my hand across the person's body, and if I'm feeling, my hands will be drawn. I'll feel the energy in my hands if there's an area that needs to receive more energy. But I've also done spot Reiki, where if someone, has an issue, like has a pain somewhere, that I just address that particular area and not the whole body. So it just depends on the circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah, I also incorporate Reiki in my chiropractic practice, and in my searching of where it originated beyond Japan was Egypt. And if you look at some of the hieroglyphics, you will see somebody holding their hands to the back of someone like this. So I believe they were also practicing Reiki, or you can call it energy medicine. And some people can even do it long distance.
So why are so many individuals afraid of alternative practices? Linda?
Well, I think that it's our indoctrination, especially in this country. If we're not going to a medical quote doctor, MD, who's been certified and ratified and stamped by the establishment, then then we are programmed not to trust them and not to feel like what they're doing is legitimate or valid. So that's kind of what the issue is here, at least in my experience.
So it even goes beyond this country, because I did some training, some indigenous medicine training in Africa. And even in Africa, they have been colonized to believe that the so-called white man's medicine is the only medicine. And it's just to keep us away from original medicine, which is herbs and healing through the earth, where they have actually, for instance, take something like willow bark. From the willow bark tree comes salicylic acid. Salicylic acid is actually aspirin. But what they do is strip the bark apart, synthesize the salicylic acid out, and make it into a pill that they can sell. Whereas if you just boil the bark, you can get rid of that same headache with the aspirin. Now, when they take away how God made it, it destroys the lining of the stomach, the aspirin. So what they did was take nature and strip it apart and just give us the synthesized version so they could,
Yeah, it's all about the dollar.
Can I actually interject here? So before we had modern day science, a lot of that these practices were actually stolen from the indigenous people that were colonized. And they put their tag on it, they put their signature on it, and they're using it because we understand that, the bark that you were talking about is a more natural form of aspirin. You can go in any natural store right now and find that there, but that product is labeled by some big corporation who's mass producing it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all by design to, when you look at the state of medicine right now, it's just in shambles, especially after the pandemic, where I was a frontline healthcare worker. Most of the nurses, all of my colleagues, the doctors were totally burned out from the system. It's a mess. And all they keep doing is giving out pills. Whereas through the pandemic, I was giving out natural medicine, helpful agents, and people were getting better from that. And the medicine that they were giving in the hospitals was actually killing people.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention that they only give you medicine not to heal, but to sustain the problem. It's never a cure attached to the medicine that is given to us. It's just to keep you to be perpetually on that medication, feeding into our greater pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, big pharma. Yeah. I would like to interject something too. I have a cousin who's from Puerto Rico, and she's actually my blood cousin. She's the Taino Arawak woman. Her name is Vanessa. And Vanessa was on a run from New York City all the way down to Florida, and then they would catch a boat over to Cuba. And during that run, she got sick. I believe it was in Tennessee, COVID. They hospitalized her, and she was on a breathing tube, a trach, and they kept her in a induced coma for almost 2 months. One morning, she woke up, and she started pulling that tube out of her throat. The nurse was in the room. She says, what are you doing? If you pull that out, you're going to die. Well, of course, you don't know my cousin. She gave that nurse a finger. And then, so the nurse says, that's okay. I'm going to take care of you because I'm going to go get your doctor. The doctor came down. What are you doing? By that time, she had pulled the tube out of her throat. Now, Vanessa is a trained surgical nurse for years. And she told that doctor, she said, this is why people are dying from COVID, because of this trach that you put in their throats. They can't get the kind of air or the flow of air to breathe. And she got well, I think about a month later. Yeah. I talked to her earlier today, and she says, don't believe the hype. She said, these doctors are trained to make money. They're not trained to heal people. But for you, Allison, several times I've been in a hospital, and at one time you had a clinic in Ghana, Accra, right? And a lot of the nurses that waited on me, I mentioned that you had a clinic over there, said, well, what's her name? I said, Dr. Allison Parker. They said, you know her? I said, yes, my sister. So I was able to reconnect her, Allison, with a lot of those students.
The Ghanaians.
Yeah, the Ghanaians that she had trained to qualify for them to become nurses.
They are such beautiful people.
Yes, they are.
So although they're colonized and they think that the traditional allopathic medicine is superior, in their memory, they're so close to the earth that they still take the herbal. So they'll take the herbal medicine behind the doctor's back, and they'll take their medicine and kind of toss it, but they don't like to tell the doctor that. And I think a lot of indigenous people do that, and they don't have a lot of trust, especially Native people, because of the history of medicine with Native people is so horrible, where they sterilize the women and they've done experiments on them, and I mean, they just don't trust them. So, and that trust has caused them to be like have the highest rates of diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. And so it's sad that they don't trust their own country and their own doctor's medicine, and they would rather just have these chronic diseases and die early because they remember their indigenous herbs.
The interesting thing too, you were talking about the high rate of diabetes and high blood pressure, and it's because we've gone far away from what was our natural eating habit. You know, what we are eating now is just so full of salt and sugar that, and it doesn't suit us as indigenous people. It doesn't suit our body. It doesn't suit anybody, actually. So nutrition within healing medicine all goes hand in hand. But, you know, the deterioration of most of us, the illnesses that we sustain, are usually done with because of our diet, which is just actually killing us.
Dr. Linda can tell you about that because she practiced. And I believe, Dr. Linda, you're still a vegetarian?
Yes, pretty much a vegan. About 95% of the time I'm a vegan. Yeah.
Is that why y'all look so good?
It makes a difference. It really does. I mean, the food that we take is supposed to nourish us. And the Creator gave us everything that we needed in order to thrive and survive and thrive. And he did not create McDonald's fries and Popeye's chicken and all of those kinds of things that we have come to, well, some people have come to eat. And I ate it too. But then when I realized that eating the vegetarian way or plant-based foods really, and I don't want to be TMI, but when I was growing up, I was constipated my whole life until I became a vegetarian. And when that happened, I had no problem. And I realized that the way I was eating and what I was eating was contributing to that. And I really feel personally that if I hadn't made a dietary change, that I probably would have ended up with colon cancer. I really, really feel that. So, yeah, so it makes a difference.
Well, I've eaten quite a bit of vegetarian and plant-based foods and recipes. One that I love the most is the one that my wife makes. She makes a vegetarian chili, and
It's good too.
yeah, I know. And we on our property we have a nipi or sweat lodge, and over the years there's been many of our native brothers and sisters that come from all over the country just to sit in prayer in the sweat lodge with us. So one particular time, I can't think of his name. He was from Pine Ridge. He was out here. And he says, what are we having to eat the feast afterwards? I said, you like chili? Oh, yeah, I love chili. I said, okay, well, we're having chili and rice, and we're having string beans and corn. Okay, I can't wait. So 5 of them came in the house, and they were eating bowls of chili. I said, save some for somebody else. Oh, there's a lot more in the pot. No. So one of the guys says, this is some good beef chili. I said, there's no beef in it. Okay. The other guy said, well, it's got to be buffalo. I said, no. And then the other one said, well, if it's not beef and it's not buffalo, it's got to be deer meat. No. Well, what is it? I said, it has no meat in it. What the hell are you talking about? I said, there's no meat in that dish. And one of them wanted to argue with me. He says, you and I need to go out in the backyard and talk. I said, no. I said, you're eating healthy for once in your life. Look at you. You're fat.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's mean.
That's mean. Listen, we do have a lot of questions coming in right now. So I just wanted to start with the first question. What is your success rate with alternative medicine?
That guy is my success rate.
And I found with Reiki, there have been times like, I'll just give a couple of examples. There was a woman in the hospital, and she was bleeding from her colon, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And she was a friend of the family. So I went to the hospital and I said, would you like me to give you some Reiki? And she said, sure. And afterwards, the bleeding stopped. They couldn't figure out why, but it stopped, and she went back home. Another time, there was a woman who had chronic back pain, and actually she was a yoga instructor, and says, oh, I've got all this back pain. What can I, during the class? And I said, afterwards, I offered her Reiki, and she said, sure. And after the session, the pain went away and it never came back. And that was like about 6 months ago. And she said, I've had that pain for years. So again, if a person is open to receiving healing, then, miraculous type things can happen. And not with everyone. Again, it depends on the level of openness to the healing.
Right. As a chiropractor and researching chiropractic, of course, again, the white man says he discovered it, but Native people were doing what was called bone setting.
Yes.
And it was the same as chiropractic. So that's an alternative so-called medicine that I have seen so many miracles, saved so many people from going to surgery, gotten so many people out of pain from. And another, so many other instances that I will call miracles. I'm working on a book called The Miracle of Holistic Healing, that people had things going on with them that the doctors couldn't find. And I would, zone into the person. I do what's called iridology, where I read the eye and I can see what the problem is. And then I can find the effective herb that would actually zone in, not just to suppress the symptom of that dis-ease, but actually wipe out the cause of the disease. So as far as the effectiveness of alternative healing, I see more success with that than someone who's going to take insulin until their leg gets cut off, or take high blood pressure medicine until their kidneys fail, or, you know, so I would say I see more success with alternatives than I see with, you know, allopathic medicine, because in the end, the allopaths lose the game on the chronic diseases.
Very true. So we have another question, right?
But before we do that, I know that you're talking about your practices. Do you all do telemedicine?
I do.
Okay. That's good to know.
I can do distance Reiki healing. Yes, that is an option.
Awesome. And we're going to get that information where people can actually reach out to you for a treatment after this broadcast. I'll put it in post. So we have a question from Ray J. Gale, and he says this is awesome information. He wanted to know how you all would suggest helping others rebuild their connection or trust in the natural medicinal paths.
Well, I would say just start out small. Like, for instance, I was talking about willow bark. So if you have a lot of pain in your body and you're taking Motrin, ibuprofen, aspirin, and all of that, start out with something simple like peppermint oil. Magnesium vitamin is a natural muscle relaxer. You have, we said the willow bark is like aspirin. Try a chiropractor. If you have a chronic disease, then just, you know, start with one thing at a time. You know, they sell herbs, and even in the regular grocery stores now, teas, tea bags, and, you know, do your own research or talk to somebody like me or Dr. Linda or your neighborhood naturopath or chiropractor or acupuncturist, and get some advice from them, and just take it one step at a time. I find it very weird that people that are on 6 and 7 medications to come to see me, and I ask them, why don't you try, for instance, cholesterol medicine? I'm like, why don't you come off the cholesterol medicine and take lemon and cayenne pepper water instead of the cholesterol medicine? Get off all the foods that cause cholesterol and give it about 2 to 3 weeks to see how you feel. And the first thing they ask me is, what's the side effects of the lemon and cayenne? I'm like, you got a bag full of drugs. Did you read the side effects of those drugs? So it's a matter of actually just waking up to the reality that, what did your great grandmother do if they had high cholesterol?
And that
medicine?
That's exactly what he's basically saying here, because he's like, how do you help others? And that comment that you just made, what did your great grandmother do before there was this medication?
Exactly.
And also embracing the idea and the reality, this food is medicine. Exactly. So you think of food as medicine, you have a different relationship with what you eat. And if you have an understanding of what foods can be helpful to heal chronic diseases, what foods help to contribute to dis-ease in the body. And once you begin to get an understanding, once so many people have changed their diet to a much more healthier one and have seen an improvement and go, okay, this actually works. So there are a lot of ways to bring people into a different awareness around what they can do to become healthy, and not just, I got a pain, I got an issue, let me run to the doctor or get diagnosed and says, well, I'm going to be on this medication for the rest of my life. And just a quick story, I had an underactive thyroid, and I went to an acupuncturist for a minute, and then she gave me brown seaweed pills to take. Now, in the interim, I had gone to my primary care, and she had given me this hormone replacement, or these hormones that I had to take for my thyroid for the rest of my life. I said, I ain't taking that. I am going to find out another way. And when I went back and told her I got my levels were checked and they were normal, and she goes, I said, yeah, and I was on this brown seaweed. Oh, she said, yeah, the iodine. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that? Why are you sending me down the road of having to take a drug for the rest of my life? So just being open to thinking about other ways of handling the information that you get from your physician.
That's important too, because a lot of us don't take the initiative when questioning our physician. Um, Most of our physicians just prescribe by rote. They just do it because that's something that they've habitually done a long time. But it's a
Mhm.
conversation that you need to have as far as your health is concerned about you
Yep.
going the naturopathic way. So
Hmm.
we have another question from Brian Young. He says, first and always in my prayers. He's talking about you, Elder. He
Thank
said, my
you.
mental health is always a concern. Post-traumatic stress disorder is haunting my soul. What do you folks recommend?
Well, first of all, I would ask Brian, where did the PTSD come from? Were you in the military? Were you in combat or what? Or is it the neighborhood that you live in? You know, that's the first question. We need to know what that is. And then from there, we know how to direct you to the proper help. But it's not going to be a pill. I can tell you that now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of herbs that can help. I also studied Ayurvedic medicine in India just briefly, and they have a technique that they use for people that have schizophrenia and mental health issues, where it's sort of like you lay on your back and they actually drip oils onto your forehead. It sounds weird, but so much mental health was overcome by those techniques. So a lot of indigenous and melanated societies have these techniques that can help people with mental illness. There's a ton of vitamins and herbs that actually calm down, like especially anxiety. A lot of people are having anxiety. A lot of people are having sleepless nights, panic attacks because of the state of our world. And the main thing that I ask people to try is something simple like magnesium. Magnesium is something that our body makes, but of course, after a certain amount of time, we get depleted. It's no longer in our vegetables and fruits like it used to be because the soil is depleted of minerals. But if you can just get you a bottle of magnesium and take, whatever the bottle is recommending at night, you will see a big difference in your relaxation level. Other things are like meditation and yoga, and like she said, Reiki. There's so many ways to approach it other than taking the prescribed medicine that they give people for mental illness. Mental illness is difficult to combat, but there are some helpers out there that are right in your local grocery store in the vitamin section that you can use. One that I really like for panic attacks is L-theanine.
Mhm.
L-theanine is just an amino acid that I keep by my bed in a bottle. It has a lemon flavor. And sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I have 4 children and 6 grandchildren, and maybe somebody called me with some bad news, and I sit up and I'm like fretting, and I take that bottle, put it under my tongue, and within a few minutes I'm asleep, I'm calm, and I wake up refreshed. So I take magnesium, L-theanine, there's melatonin, there's a ton of mental health medicines. I unfortunately have a daughter that has so much PTSD from my divorce that she became suicidal, and I put together a group of vitamins and herbs that actually took her right out of that. One of them is GABA, GABA, capital letters. It's a long scientific word, but it's just a vitamin. Kava. There's so many that you can try one by one, but you can't mix them with prescription mental health medicines. You have to kind of wean yourself off one and start with the other. But there's so many things that you can do to get yourself back to normal, at least comfortable, at least to help you sleep and to be calm throughout the day and focused.
He did give us a little bit more context. He says, I'm still doing telehealth with the VA, and I'm taking a bunch of pills for my heart from service during Vietnam era.
Yeah. I guess, Brian, you were in Vietnam and you saw combat. You know, being a soldier or a sailor or an airman or a Marine, hoorah, and having to go and fight an enemy that is not a personal enemy to you, that plays a big part in what you go through. And I'll be honest with you, I don't go to the VA. I don't do it. But, listen to Dr. Parker and Dr. Linda. and they will guide you through whatever it is that you're going through. I can't guarantee that they can help you, but I can guarantee that they will not hurt you.
And we definitely will be posting their information and post if you would like to contact them. I did have Dr. Linda Thompson's phone number up there on the screen, and I will put that in post. And we have a comment from Dan Miller. He says, OCO, I hope to find you well today. My use of alternative medicine so far has me feeling well and alive.
Great. Dr. Linda, you had something to say about the mental health thing too, didn't you?
I was just going to say that there are some crystals. I incorporate the use of crystals in my practice, and crystals and stones, semi-precious stones, have energy with them that can work with on a mental health level as well as a physical level. So that's something that could be explored. It's just another option for that individual. Yeah, I mean,
you're welcome, Brian. You're welcome. And can I say too, along with all of this and this natural healing, sometimes talking to people who share your same story, that they have the same struggle, that you know, some of your combat buddies, people who were in that era war, that actually helps you relieve a lot of baggage that you carry. So I highly recommend talk therapy as well.
mm-hmm.
There was a question from a young lady, I think, before Brian, Alea, somebody.
Well, she just made a comment. She said alternative medicine is back to the basics. It's the only way. And then she also added that adaptogens help with anxiety.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you for that, Alea. You know, the experience of war is not a natural thing to anybody. And if you've ever had to zip up a body bag of one of your buddies in combat, that weighs on your head for a very long time. I have a nephew, I think all of you know who he is. His name is Sergeant Ian Simpson, who did 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was actually blown up in a troop carrier. And I found him after he got back a year later, sleeping in a park. So I brought him home with me. And I kept him for 3 years, and I helped him to get his VA benefits and everything else. But I think one of the biggest blessings that ever happened, there were still some guys around that knew Ian from being in the military and from not being in the military. And those guys would just get together, sit down and talk, you know. And you were right, Les. Talking can bring a lot of things to a head that where you can actually understand what you're going through. Now, I'm very proud of my nephew because he's gotten through his PTSD a great bit. And now he's actually finishing up his master's degree in economics and statistics.
That's great.
But he's found his calling. He spends 2 weeks out of every month in LA and the rest of the time here in the Washington metropolitan area. And he's working with housing homeless veterans. And I am so proud of that boy. It's just unreal. So, you know, a diamond in the raw, you can't see. But if you get inside somebody's head and into their souls, and you understand what they're going through, and you can just reach out and touch them and help them, that's what we were put on this earth to do, to help each other. And they ain't got a daggone thing to do with the color of your skin. It's not about that. It's about one heart to another heart. We need to all learn how to help each other.
Definitely.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned is having someone to talk to, but unfortunately, especially since the pandemic, many people are isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ideas that I had in 2020 and 2021 was to do some online group talks. And so, you know, I would invite people to join at a certain time, and sometimes 15 or 20 people would join, and we would just talk about, especially elderly people. They were really sad and lonely, and just having that few minutes to just speak to the group and say what they needed. I started just by just telling people what to take to keep their immune system up, but I realized that people needed to talk about their fears, how they were feeling. They were lonely and they wanted to go outside and they wanted to do this and that. But maybe we can do more of that because there's so much isolation, and vets usually have a tendency not to trust a lot of people. And they shy away from even going to therapy, just like homeless people don't want to go to shelters. So maybe and those people, if they have access to the internet, we can start doing that in our communities, because we're probably going to have another pandemic and people are going to be isolated, and people all over the world can actually join in and talk to each other, like what's going on in your country, what's going on in your neighborhood, what's going on in your state. So we should do that more, that we have this type of technology.
And you did say that healing starts in the mind, but if your mind is in a state of fear or panic or depression, that's like you have to work from the head down. And I think too, when it comes to vets having conversations like that, because they've seen combat, it's good that they're in a safe space when they're having these discussions, knowing how people treated our Vietnam vets when they came back home. There's a certain amount of shame attached to that. I saw miraculous healing in my stepfather, who also was a Vietnam vet, when he was sharing his experiences with his battle buddies, with other men who had gone through the same thing. It was a transformation in him having those conversations.
Definitely. So let me just add this. I had a really good friend. He was ex-military, and he was a loner. And in 2020, somehow he got COVID. And I had been calling him for months and months and didn't get a response. And finally, me and another girlfriend who used to be his massage therapist, we just went to his house and knocked on the door. And his son came out and said, a couple of months ago, we found Dad in the bathtub dead. Because he was afraid to go to the hospital. He was afraid to reach out. I don't know why he didn't call me, but, people get locked up. And if they get sick, then they're too weak and too unresponsive to even call a family member and say, I'm sick. And that's happening a lot.
And suicide is a big taker of people.
Definitely.
Especially on Indian reservations and former military people. I can't tell you the amount of people that I met and knew that I thought were okay that committed suicide. It's a disease. And if we don't get a handle on it for them, because there are certain signs of suicide. Yeah. And somebody just said, what do you see for the future of naturopathic medicine? The future is great because there's so much that we can do and so much medicine out there, natural medicine, that can help. So
people are losing faith in allopathy.
Traditional medicine. Yes, they are.
Taking pills and feeling bad, and taking more pills and feeling worse, and things like that.
Yeah.
So they're like, I need something else. I need help. And I hear that a lot in my telehealth things, that or people coming to my house with bags of medicine, and they're like, help me get off of this stuff.
Yeah.
So people are seeking more natural ways to be helped.
So we have about 4 minutes, and I did want to comment. Brian did make a comment, and he said, I never felt more connected than I did at a cedar ceremony. And actually, this is something that I do know that we do as Indigenous people, that when we honor our vets, because more of us serve within the military than anybody, per capita, given our numbers, we serve a lot within that. We protect our country. There are ceremonies that we do for our vets when they come home, and these are ceremonies. I believe that there's a documentary called The Warrior's Way. I'm not sure if that's the right word. I'll put a link in that in post, where they talk about those ceremonies that we give our individuals when they come back home from war.
Linda, do you have anything to say, sweetheart? Because we only got a couple minutes left.
Well, I just want to say that to be open-minded, that there are other ways, in fact, natural ways to heal the self. And that's the way the Creator made the earth, for us to get whatever we needed to heal ourselves, to feed ourselves, to nourish ourselves from nature. And I think that it's so important that we keep ourselves open to that and, embrace that, because what's going on now with the environment, with the pollution, with all the things that we're bombarded with, television, EMF, radiation, we have to move back into there. Even just walking barefoot outside is a way to sort of pull a lot of that energy off. So just understanding there are simple, easy, no cost ways in order for us to begin our own self-healing is very important.
Yes, thank you so much.
Can I just make one comment before we wrap up? As someone who in 2004, I retired as a flight attendant because I sustained an injury in my C6 and 7 column. And it was the first time that I was introduced to naturopathic medicine. I immediately went to a chiropractor, and I swear by a chiropractor. I had known many people who had gotten their discs fused together through the medical surgery that they did, and I didn't want to do that. And I have to tell you that I have more vitality, more movement, more flexibility by going to consistent chiropractic treatment and using naturopathic medicine, acupuncture, all of this other kind of stuff. I have to tell you, even I know Elder is talking about this, but I swear by, I will go that route first before I go any other route. And I encourage people to look at that, to consider alternative medicine. Consider that before you're put on any kind of medications, or that they're opening up your body to do anything that's unnatural to your body. So that's just my, 10 cents on this.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Dr. Linda Thompson, Dr. Allison Parker. You ain't got to tell me. And of course, my executive producer, Leslie Fry, for having an opportunity to share this information with everybody. Would you all come back again and do it again in part 2 sometime in the future?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of things we didn't touch on.
Oh yeah.
That I'd like to touch
Part
on.
Part two.
Definitely.
Yep. So is it my time to close out? Okay. I will tell you, like my grandfather in South Carolina would tell us. We would go down there in the summer to see Grandpa Lim, Grandma Bama Rachel, and all my other people down there. That's the Cherokee side of my family. And my grandfather would come out and look at us. We were little boys. And he would say, "Do you boys know what it's all about?" And my cousin Mikey, he was the youngest, he would say, "No, Grandpa, what's it about?" He said, "You know, your brother or your sister don't have to look like you or share the same skin color in you to be your brother or your sister." He also said that, it's not about the color of your eyes or the pigmentation of your skin. It's not about the texture of your hair. It's not about the clothes you wear. It's not about who you pray to and call your God. And he would look at us and he would say, "Do you know what it's all about?" And he would stand up, put his right hand over his heart and look at us. He said, "It's how you treat my heart. That's what it's all about." So I'll leave you with these words in Chalagi. And see, the white man couldn't even pronounce it. Call us Cherokees. It's Chalagi. Danada Goai Wado. And the word Wado means thank you. Thank you all for being a part of the show tonight. I love all of you. And we'll talk to you again in the future after my surgery. Thank you, Leslie. Take care.